Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or Blockchain Brad, and today I'm talking about Constellation Network. We're here with two gentlemen that I know well. We have Ben and Wyatt. We have the CEO and the CTO in the hot seat. Thanks, guys, for your time to talk all about Constellation Network updates.
Thanks, Brad. Good to see you again, man.
Super welcome, guys. Now, for all of those who want to know, this is entirely free. This is about giving everyone a chance to learn more about what these guys have been doing. Wyatt, as the CTO, is busy with the tech. Ben is busy with the business of the day, making this a real, genuine startup for now and the future. Let's start with you, Ben, firstly. Now, you, as I said, are leading this out. Give us a bit of a recap, though, quickly on what Constellation Network is actually trying to do in the context of what you've built so far.
Yeah, I think interesting enough, what Constellation is trying to do is trying to acknowledge the fact that we're in a new industry. We're not in a cryptocurrency industry. We're not in a blockchain industry. We're in like a hybrid, or as we call like this postmodern industry that bridges existing technologies and big data and trying to bridge that with the cryptocurrency and blockchain world. And so what Constellation is doing is trying to create a very simple API that can take massive amounts of data and put that on a distributed ledger, or in our case, a directed acyclic graph. Yeah, the DAG, if you will, in a very easy way. So a lot of our technology is appealing to big data scientists and engineers that are looking for solutions to validate data at scale and have an immutable audit trail on a distributed ledger while adding that kind of layer of security.
Right. Now, Wyatt, you are the lead techie, you are the CTO, you know everything about what it is to have a DAG built into the system and why. But I wanted to ask you in the context of layer one solutions and the SaaS model itself, because when I was looking at you as you've evolved, it seems like you're melding these together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that, from what we've learned, in trying to, get adoption and find folks to work with, there's almost kind of like two worlds that you need to exist in. I mean, this is obviously why Ethereum has consensus. And what we wanted to do is create an offering both for, like paying customers, enterprise types of folks who really need this technology, but also create an on-ramp for, those sort of organic, open source devs or individuals who want to get into the tech or, sort of see a path to monetization around providing data and marketplace sort of world.
That makes a lot of sense.
So in reality, so we're really trying to, if we were to use an analogy, we're very similar to something called Databricks or like Cloudera, which is, creates offerings, sort of like a platform effect offering for enterprise clients, while at the same time, still working on an open source technology with a wider community, trying to add more features for everyone. So,
awesome. So in that respect, I want to jump across, and you can add to this in a moment, but Ben, with regard to being permissioned, that's where Wyatt's alluding to with regard to closed systems that often enterprise like, because it gives them some sort of degree of control. How do you sort of balance the permission and permissionless sort of aspects of design when fundamentally, as Wyatt's articulated, you want to be public, you want to be permissionless, and you want to be, open source?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and there's so many layers to this, and it's actually some information we're going to be releasing over the next couple of days. Is really how do we articulate an ecosystem that's run by a cryptocurrency and one that's run by revenue, or that keeps the lights on at Constellation, right? Where enterprises are very interested in technology, they start with a permission chain or a permission network. That's where they're safe. That's where their safety is right now. But the real value of Constellation is this open, interoperable network that is autonomous. So the real value really expands once an enterprise starts to graduate and tap into that open network of validated or truth data, if you will. And so one of the big issues, and something I'm not going to completely kind of divulge, but I'll kind of use this as a moment to share, is, when we look at enterprise clients, we get a lot of criticism from the crypto community that, do you really need a token if you're just using permission network? And one of our solutions is going to be around staking a representation of tokens that if a client comes on from Constellation to work with us in a permission network, that we're going to stake a footprint in the network in some sort of burning mechanism or capacity in DAG. And
Right.
so that there is a correlation of our time and energy spent with a client that is articulated within the network and represents that enterprise client in the future.
Well, that's important, and we'll move across to you for a second, Wyatt, because a lot of people don't understand the utility of proof of stake or anything like it with regard to securing networks, with regard to the adding to the robustness of a network. So can you talk us through this sort of concept, you know, conceptually of trying to bring in something that is added layers to the DAG in order to sort of espouse more of a utilitarian and perhaps more decentralized application for enterprises?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I would say that, the real solution to, conflict resolution in a distributed network is a hybrid approach to, staking, proof of work, and in our case, reputation.
Mm-hmm.
In the mechanism of adding a small staking component here is really just trying to make sure that while there is sort of this divide between the enterprise world and the open source wider network world, we want to make sure that everybody, it is sort of helping elevate each other in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to create like some kind of mechanics so that everyone feels like, this is a team effort, as opposed to like, oh, are they just doing consulting and just launch this token for whatever reason?
Right. I think it's really important also because it validates you as a holistic, decentralized network, because you can suddenly convert the enterprises into the public network and with validity and with real cause. But let's break it down into your tech, the stuff you've been working on, Wyatt, and leading out, because some of the things you've done this year have led from the start. It's not just really the DAG. You've been really building this out.
Yeah, no. So it's not just about building, our consensus model, which I'm really happy to say from all of our testing and where we are, is actually truly concurrent. We're able to run multiple consensus rounds at the same time, and we're able to even really see that horizontal scalability curve just from our local testing. It's phenomenal. You set out with these dreams and ambitions, and you can, but you go and you don't think you can the whole time until you find out that you did. So it's definitely been magical in that regard. But,
and it's good that you've tested this. I mean, is there any way in which people can verify that through, for example, not the peer reviews, not there, but with regard to assessing the code, obviously transparent as much as possible through the repos, but can we see the performance as you've been building this out?
Oh yeah, totally. So I can, one thing to show you is like our Node UI, which has some pretty cool visualizations, but we actually, rely pretty heavily on some metrics tools. So when someone actually deploys a cluster and when we have the test out, you'll actually be able to see all of the, one, the resource utilization of the machines themselves, but two, you'll actually be able to see like, metrics like transactions per second, consensus rounds, the effects that has in the system. And you can actually just plot these things fairly well. So it's just a simple linear plot that you want to see in TPS as you add nodes, and it's about as simple as that. So.
Got it. Now, with regard to things like scalability and speed, those genuine words we heard at the beginning of all blockchain startups, how's everything going in terms of the throughput and the latency, just those generic things that need to be done before anything else can be built upon it?
Oh yeah, no. So that was definitely a prerequisite to getting everything done we've done with application support, which I'm going to hop to in a second. I want to make sure I get a chance to talk about some of the great successes we've had there.
Mm-hmm.
But just in general from our testing, and obviously like we're with our test net, we're going to be opening up this thing up to like a wider network, machines that are not necessarily cloud-based, things like that. But in our hermetically sealed cloud-based environment. We were able to see, the stability that we need for a blockchain, both from like resource management perspective, but, also from, conflict issues and things like that. We're basically like, in terms of like what was a metric to really understand whether or not, our consensus model achieved its goal, it's basically like what is a potential maximum TPS as you add more nodes to the system.
Right.
I could get into it moves in intervals of 3, but like basically you want to just see a nice linear line right here, some sort of slope that's between 0 and 1.
Mm-hmm.
And very fortunate to feel comfortable.
So the theory worked, Wyatt. Your concurrent theory, building out the number of nodes without compromising security, the plan worked, and now we're seeing that in actuality from what you're saying as you move towards testnet and mainnet. Now, let's talk about use cases, or plans for that. Either of you could do that. You seem to want to talk about it first, Wyatt, but the fundamental reason why you're building this is for real purposes, is for people to utilize the technology and build something upon it. So how is everything going in that respect?
I'm really happy to say that we've had a lot of success, both from adoption, kind of on the pilot enterprise side, as well as on the academic side. So if anyone's out there hasn't seen our video of a pilot program where we created a digital twin, that's what we call a representation of a physical device, same analogy we make for an API. We were able to actually use referential information, in this case latitude and longitude, as well as cryptographic signatures coming from an Android device, to plot the actual the physical location of a device. So we can get into more of the specifics on that program, but that was just a real world example of something we built for something on Android.
Right.
And also I'm really to say that one of the approaches we wanted to have in the beginning was the ability to have some kind of scalable architecture in terms of application integrations. That would mean how do you actually connect our cryptographically secure protocol or some kind of a database for auditing all the information through your data pipeline. How do you integrate that within some sort of existing system? And I'm really happy to announce that some work that we did, at least a paper that I wrote around creating a model, a MapReduce model for microservices, was accepted for publication, which is really great. And basically, the whole idea here is that we have the notion of a channel. Most of our mainnet DAG is a state channel, state around a financial ledger. What we wanted to do is extend the notion of a blockchain or a DAG to arbitrary data sources and also arbitrary validation criteria. So validating not just a ledger, do I have the balance to send information, but if I'm monitoring sensor data, is this within a valid range? If I'm monitoring identity or authentication for the remote keyless entry to my smart car. Do I have referential information like lat long time, the route that the packet took to get to wherever it needs to go? Does that match up with the lat long you saw, adding that kind of level of security? We can implement all those things in terms of MapReduce queries. So we're really excited to roll that out and sort of have this kind of interface that you have for a lot of different big data tools out there. And the end result here is that if you're a programmer, you'd be able to spin up an interface, an application interface in a REPL, and be able to run queries across different state channels. The same way you might run jobs across static data sources or stream information and join information across those streams.
Right. So I'm going to stop you there for a sec, because one of the things that is really interesting there is that you've made it so that devs across the world who want to access a network that's got the technology can do that. And that's exciting because, through your MapReduce approach, they can go and engage and build upon you. But I also want to move across to Ben for a sec. Now, Ben, with you, trying to get the attention of the enterprises is one thing, trying to educate them about blockchains another, and then getting them to transition into your network, that's the challenge itself. And what Wyatt saying is that there's clearly a very wide net of use cases beyond even some of the things initially you may have been thinking. So are you currently showing evidence in that respect with regard to how they can utilize your blockchain, and what's the pipeline like in that respect?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Our pipeline is kind of broken down into government outfits that are pushing RFPs to add layers of security around multi-domain operations, merging legacy system data with cloud infrastructure data. That becomes very fascinating because they're not motivated by monetary value. And then when you switch over to SMEs, small, medium, and enterprise customers, the motivating factor in pipeline looks a lot different. And our approach there is not to educate people on blockchain. You can get yourself caught into a rabbit hole, but actually start to pinpoint problems and solutions to existing personas. So looking at data science teams and VP of engineering. You're often articulating how we work in correspondence with, say, Kafka and Storm Solutions in your Cloudera stack.
Right.
How we can add like more transparency for your downstream pipeline visibility, like Wyatt was talking about. And as you shift up the ladder to the CTO, you're starting to sell into a different concept. And the CTO is really there to look at the 3 to 5 year plan. Now I'm talking about companies that have like 300 people to, thousands of employees, and they're looking at what's on the horizon that we're missing. And really where we kind of find our bread and butter is working with cybersecurity companies and extending security protection beyond the walls of a data warehouse and into kind of data in motion or data in transit, and adding that protection layer across the APIs for large amounts of data that need to be moved. And there's very little protection there. And so when you present that kind of angle into partnerships, they start to kind of see this bigger picture that there might be a vulnerability or the next major hack that's coming in the way of IoT and connected systems.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, Wyatt, I wanted to ask you when, for example, Ben's approaching these enterprises, because that's a major part of the design. In that respect, how do you actually present this in terms of SaaS? Because many of them don't want to necessarily know about the mechanics of blockchain, and you certainly know it. But when it comes to trying to onboard these parties, how do you approach that with an ease of transition with the interface itself and with the SaaS approach?
Yeah, no, 100%. And, for anyone out there too, I mean, this is very similar to, what like Red Hat or Databricks or Cloudera has done by creating sort of a platform around an open source tool. So essentially what we really want to do is just create like a plug and play API based system where they can get access to either, previously hosted nodes, or basically we want to remove, depending on the actual client themselves, we want to remove as much complexity as possible, just to get the actual like value out. So for instance, like if you just want to make sure that, some API of yours, is represented, it has some sort of like a digital representation, and you have an audit trail around your entire pipeline, then it might be as simple as us spinning up a cluster for you, and you integrating that API within your existing data pipeline.
Right.
For someone who wants more complex, it might require us to actually understand their code base and help implement some type of custom validation criteria. It's really just sort of about bridging the gap for these clients who might actually have more resources on the financial side as opposed to the manpower side, who don't want to take resources away in terms of dev cycles and time.
Right.
And that's really is how, at least in like, in Silicon Valley and sort of like the data space, that the open source world, which it needs to exist in order to gain, developer clout or credibility. Because, obviously like you need someone who knows, it's worth their salt to vet these things and find ways to use them. But once there are enough plug and playable rollout solutions, you want to be able to just give someone a, roll your own kind of kit thing, where they can pay a simple licensing or API-based, event-based fee or a hosting fee, and just get access to something through a simple API. So we're basically learning iteratively by, having more, learning custom validation criteria and making state channels for folks. And also sharing that with the wider public, because, there's this great feedback loop that exists with the open source community where someone might take something that, that and make it better. And then we can sort of share back and forth and hopefully have, the same kind of efficacy on, the private network side versus the public network. And, hopefully in the future, as we start to accept more of a decentralized world, we can sort of merge everything that happens.
And it sounds like also you've built an interface that is already usable, because Ben's already alluding to a lot of stuff in the pipeline for the enterprise sector. But from there, I wanted to ask you, what are those fundamental tech updates that you wanted to let us know about, Wyatt? Because there is some stuff that you know about in the tech pipeline. What's some of those things that you want to highlight today to let us know that you have been building substantially?
Yeah, totally. So we're moving like the core protocol from alpha into a beta phase, which is gonna, entail like our public test net, and we're choosing our node operators as well for that. And obviously we have a mainnet rolling out as well. And in that same sort of process, as we start to open that up and give that some room to breathe and prepare for mainnet, we're going to be moving our application support, which obviously we have some resources on GitHub and some videos of that right now available from alpha beta. So over the next few months, as we begin to roll the mainnet out, expect a bunch of documentation from the developer side and some stuff that you can reproduce for creating digital twin state channels and making queries across these state channels and what we're calling like a knowledge graph. So the ability to derive some, definable, some declarative sense of truth using referential information across these cryptographically secure state channels. So you can think about it like creating between data where, if you have water moving through two pipes, you can merge them together and say, hey, like any information that doesn't conflict in this mergeable pipe answers a question about A versus B. So I'm really excited for that, and I'm going to be doing, some, going out to some meetups and doing some videos of actually just building some random stuff in a REPL to get people to see it, and just sort of really excited for some community adoption and to share this.
It's good news to hear that you're moving towards your native token, towards your mainnet, because this has been a long time coming. You certainly released into the ecosystem of crypto very early, as I'm sure you would agree. Now, Ben, what does it mean as a CTO to have prospects of mainnet with a native token coming? Obviously, the indicators are that is really the true empirical proof of utility. The real test goes there. How has it been in the process from beginning to now and beyond, just as a participant in this very convoluted space we know as crypto?
Oh, I mean, you're tackling not only like we mentioned, like different business models, right? You've got this, enterprise business model, you have this crypto economics model, and trying to marry the two have been a huge challenge that I have not seen anybody do successfully. And I think that, over the next couple of weeks and really months, you're going to start to see that come alive on our dedication to providing some sort of authentic mechanism in theory on how these worlds relate. And then taking a step back, what we're building, I mean, you could say it's a long time in the coming, but I mean, it's only been the better part of a year that we really got, some funding to come in and start building this. This is a big problem that it takes very smart people, and why it's interviewed people across the globe to manage this level of distributed systems knowledge. And it's hard to find those people. We've got a very powerful team that knows how to tackle this. And so it's been a lot just getting people to understand that everything that we build is built with intention. We're not ripping off some algorithm that's used across every other consensus model. We're building that from scratch. We're building the reputation from scratch. We're trying to synthesize an industry of big data that's somewhat mature in the space, right? And we're trying to marry that with economics around the blockchain world.
And that's a tough ask to do, because it's great to hear Wyatt is now interviewing for world-class participants in your project, because it does take that next level of knowledge that many people don't have. And it's a very competitive market because of the sheer size of raises. In the past, it meant that people had capital in this industry to really offer huge sums of money to get the best of the best into their team. So that's a challenge. So in that respect, how are you going with your runway and your funding so that you can sustain this through? As you mentioned, you've done the first part, you've done that raise. That's not easy. You've got VCs in to support you. Now, what's the plan in terms of roadmap of funding?
Oh, well, I mean, honestly, like now that we're about to release mainnet, it's just adoption. And, we're creating a sustainable validator rewards model that at the very least, will pay folks to keep this thing up and interested. So there's that. And I mean, in reality here, I mean,
we have runway to keep this going for a while.
Well, that's what we wanted to hear. Now, Wyatt, in that respect, I really wanted to ask you this and see how you can explain it, because many people can't explain it clearly. But now that you've redressed some of the token economic aspects, or developed it, how can we sort of assess Constellation Network in terms of its token with regard to the ecosystem? And I think what I'm alluding to is that we've seen over time a lot of price decline just generally with first wave projects. And that's just a given, because we've seen why. We know all the other aspects of crypto that exist. But now that you've added a new aspect into your model, which is that staking component, do you think that that's going to have a significant impact in the future of your growth? And that also reflects on surely the utility, which is the core of your whole design.
Yeah, totally. I think that in general, for any kind of, like token-based system, I think a hybrid approach between either, proof of work and reputation, or staking and reputation is kind of going to be the most important thing. Notice I mentioned the reputation aspect. I don't want to get too esoteric on that, but I think what you're alluding to is that, we're really focusing on creating the deflationary aspect and the almost token state channel, if you will, that we think about DAG as sort of being focused as the financial component to interoperate between different data sources. Obviously, just off the bat, I want to say this will be configurable for folks who want to just create a state channel and not really have any kind of staking component. But for what it's worth, we were thinking about adding a small staking component to node operation, but not allowing that to have any impact on conflict handling. So everything will still be reputation based, more so just trying to create a deflationary aspect, both from the operator side, but also from an enterprise adoption side. So if some enterprise player wants to come on and doesn't want to connect to a public network, we also want to make sure that their utility of our time and our focus is reflected in a deflationary component of the wider network. So.
Right. Well, that's a really good update, I think, because that's going to certainly change the way in which the whole performance. I mean, I obviously can't make any speculation with regard to the token itself, but the whole remodeling and reconfiguring is going to affect that as well. There's no question. And I can say that. I don't want you to comment on this, because the reason is I don't want to ever blur the lines with regard to the prospects of, the implications of security, because we know you're not a security. We know that you're a utility, but it is always a challenging thing to go and design this so that you illustrate right from the outset that you are, naturally a tokenized utility. It's almost a conundrum in this industry.
Totally. And if I could actually take a second back, and for anyone out there, if you're maybe more math focused, take a look at my token economics paper that I released. It's basically like I've tried to formulate almost like a commodity around our token, so such that our token acts as a commodity for getting access to throughput on our network. Honestly, from the get-go, the idea of tokenization or creating some sort of utility or a commodity around a system of value was really kind of like paramount as to like, why do these things even matter? I mean, like you can, write Monopoly money on a MySQL database, like,
right.
Hey, I'm not going to go. But basically, we really wanted to find a way to actually almost like mature the notion of a token to create a physical, quantifiable, real world value that it's based in. And if you look at the last page of my paper, you'll notice that it's actually like based in bits, or like Bitcoins, which is really funny. So the actual unit of value is based upon the amount of information that you add to the system, or that you maintain or don't add disorder. Bottom line is we created an actual quantized unit of value that is based in the ability to process information on a financial level across these different data sources. So,
right, and I appreciate that, because people will talk about this, not just your token, but every token in crypto, because that seems to be paramount right now in the conversations that I have. Obviously, there's those that want to focus on the technology, but they do need to blend, and they do need to make sense. And you're making sense of it the best you can, and you're focusing commodity. Now, with regard to the prospects of extending this beyond the current exchanges you have, Ben, what's the plan? I know that this is a really annoying question, because everyone seems to want to know these things, but to be fair, this is the nature of the game we're in. Are you planning on being even more accessible in the future to bigger volumes, to bigger exchanges?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I can't divulge who we're working with right now and who we're setting to get going. But we're absolutely going to be going further and farther. So.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Now, is there anything else, Wyatt, that you wanted to add that perhaps I missed? Because it's been a while since we've spoken. Just, to really get the message across about the network, to get the message across that you are really at that stage where you're not far away from the main net, and you're really going to showcase, the entry point into the business domain, and also allow developers even more access to really start building this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a really interesting time because we're basically about to flip a light switch on everything we've been working on. So it's, I wonder what that's going to be like, ground zero on that day. But if there was sort of almost like any takeaway I'd have, I mean, first off, it's, over the next couple of months, there hasn't been a ton in terms of like, documentation and onboarding stuff and tutorials. It's about to change. And we've really just been heads down biddling, as they say. But I almost from a high level perspective to folks who are like, okay, like, well, I'd like to check this out, when everything's ready to roll in a sandbox, right? Our approach is that this is more than just cryptocurrency. This is really just a movement around making data publicly available, accurate, and secure. And what we really wanted to do was find a way to create all of these disparate data sources around the world, and find a way to make them secure, public, and also to referentially validate them. So, while we did start this, and with our funding aspect and as one, notable use case, which was a token, a cryptocurrency, we really wanted to create almost like some international like data commodity exchange that happens in real time and is hosted organically by folks who want to make data public, open, and available.
Hence the network.
Yeah, and I mean, to Penn's point, I mean, it's like I think we're really at this point from a geopolitical socioeconomic level where there is value associated to knowledge, and it spans multiple different industries, and almost like what we need from a policy making perspective, from an individual making a consumer based choice or a lifestyle choice, you need access to information. And you need to know whether or not that information is valid, where it came from, in order to have some grounds of truth to communicate with any other individual. And I mean, this really was the promise of blockchain technology when we got in it. I mean, like I got in it for my own reasons a long time ago, more so than the financial aspect. And I really, we've very long and hard to create a technology to provide that. And yeah, I'm really ready to let this come to life.
Well, Wyatt, it's great to hear you talk about that, because clearly that validation and valorization of data is paramount even to the mechanisms of blockchain, perhaps, or in this case, a DAG, because it's the premise of what you're trying to do that really clearly excites you. And the potential of data, I'm going to move across to Ben for a moment, that's quite immense in the enterprise sector, because data is really misunderstood, I think. It's such a valuable commodity in itself. You're trying to utilize this network to really open up the dialogue of reframing how data is perceived, how it can be utilized via these mechanisms through the DAG. So what are your thoughts on the future in the roadmap as you build this out into the next level?
No, Wyatt and I share this same rebellious spirit here, which is that over the past several years, there are headlines made about how data breaches have occurred at these multinational corporations, and they've abused their ability to be these custodians of our information. And we are now approaching this world that data should be governed by a community. It should be based off of reputation. We do everything in our life on reputation. We score an Uber, they score us. We get paired with the best driver and the right transportation. But more importantly, what we're trying to do is make data, validated data on this decentralized network, available to everybody and governed by everybody, so that it's not in the hands of Facebook, Google, and Amazon that have figured out how to monetize it. And yet we keep giving them more and more data because we don't have any choices.
Right.
This is kind of the revolution that we want to see happen.
Absolutely. And gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of this narrative of decentralized data, of making sure that we really reframe this to be more democratic, of democratizing data, of making it so that we can be actors in this in a general sense, in terms of even the decentralized mechanisms that are built by such things as the DAG. It means that we can be rewarded. We can be incentivized for being participants in a whole new way of thinking about how we can create a decentralized network for the future and also engage in enterprise. You're doing all of those things. It's not easy. And then you're adding a token into the mix, another layer of complexity, and you're doing that as best you can. I really applaud you for your efforts. I hope you continue forward and really make a real dent in this marketplace, because if we don't have people like you who are trying to do real things, then who knows what will happen in this crypto casino. So keep building, keep growing, keep going, and don't give up.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
That was great. Well said, sir.
You're very welcome. All the best, guys, and we'll catch up very soon. If you haven't checked out Constellation Network, make sure you do. The links will all be built down below, and make sure if you want to find out more about the tech, contact Wyatt. He knows literally everything about the technological aspects. Talk to Ben about the enterprise, the business side. He knows a lot about it. They're available on Telegram. Hit them up. Until then, take care, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome.